Okay.
Yep.
Welcome everyone to the second position clinic for the San Diego County Football Officials Association. Once again, we're honored to have some of our best officials presenting information to you and from their perspective. We all know we work together as a crew. It's exciting that on tonight's clinic, right, already we can see back judges, referees, flanks, and we all are working together in a cohesive unit. But for tonight, we get to look at our work through the eyes of the umpire. And so it's very appropriate for anyone on the crew to say to the umpire, what do you expect from me? What do you need from me? And any of our great umpires will be able to answer that question very clearly. So tonight we have three of our absolute best. First of all, Ed Blick, who's not on the call yet, that I can see, is going to be calling in from the East Coast. So when he joins us, and if he joins us, it'll be a real pleasure to hear from him. He's been a crew chief. He's worked many championships and will gladly share all of his knowledge. Also, Mike Gunzelman. Mike is a individual I hugely admire. He came to our association, made himself a great official right away. Very strong in his approach to all levels of the sport of football, whether it's youth or the CIF championship game. But what was most impressive to me is that when we started to make some adjustments in the way our umpires moved or positioned or the philosophies of our umpires, Mike was one of those guys who could have said, yeah, old dog, new tricks, not really interested in this. But he was just the opposite. He was a veteran official who had already accomplished so much and said, you know what, I'm interested in this and I want to learn it. So when it came to run zone coverage, he became one of the masters of that philosophy. And to this day is one of our very finest umpires in the implementation of run zone coverage. And when it comes to the San Diego County Football Officials Association and the state of California, to be honest. And finally, Scott Carroll. Scott has, again, proven himself at all levels and now at the collegiate level and is a referee at the junior college level. But his passion and his heart and the bulk of his work has been at the youth and high school level. So obviously we selected three officials who are in that genre of great high school umpires. So it's our thanks and my personal thanks that they're here with us tonight, sharing their expertise. And we're very, very fortunate to listen to them. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to turn it over to Scott Carroll right now. Scott?
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the kind words and the introduction. I have a feeling that you're going to be, and I hope that everybody throughout this presentation feels that they can ask any questions at any time. The only thing that I ask is if you're not asking questions, you're not engaged in that conversation, please put yourself on mute so we don't have any of the background noise and distractions there. Mike's going to start us off, but we're going to talk about the role of the umpire, key mechanics for an umpire on the field, and some focus on rules. One of the things that I've learned, or have been taught, I should say, I don't know how well I've learned it, but I've been taught that one of the key roles as an umpire is to make sure that you understand the rules, particularly when you have somebody like me that works at different levels and we forget. So the umpire has a key role in the crew, a key role on the field, and a key role in knowledge. And we're going to talk about some of those keys tonight. What this is not, it's not a mechanics presentation. We have a mechanics book, we have a philosophies, we know what the real nuts and bolts are as far as the mechanics of an umpire, where to spot the ball, how to spot that. So we're not really going to get into those details. You have some information on that. If you have questions about those, if you want to get into some of that, we'll be more than happy to talk about those things, more than happy to give our insight to that. But where we really want to focus about is the talking points about what is an umpire, the finer points of it, some things that you may not have thought of, may not have been presented before as an umpire, and what we can do as umpires to make the game both go smoothly and the crew work more efficiently and effectively when we're on the field. Make sense? Any questions at this time? All right, Michael, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you all tonight. Really looking forward to this. I asked to be able to speak to the first topic, the role of the umpire. As Steve pointed out, when the umpire was looked at in a new and different way, it really did fire me up. It added another level of interest and passion and adrenaline for officiating, and especially for the umpire role. I think the umpire can be of tremendous service to the crew and to the players by controlling the game. Some of my closest and dearest friends in the association like to joke and tease that the umpire is nothing more than a ball spotter. And to that I say, I need to get better friends. But that's my problem. I really think the umpire, the U stands for unique. We're in a unique role in many different ways, not just in terms of the action on the field, but in our opportunity to be of service to the crew, to the players, and to the game itself. But I guess what I want to emphasize is that it's not just playing a position and taking the mechanics and other responsibilities that go with it. I think you have to make a conscious decision to own this role and to maximize what the role can do for the crew and for the game. We are the center of action on every scrimmage play. To me, that makes us the hub, whether you want to call it the hub, the center, the anchor. It reminds me of when I played. I was the center and I was a nose tackle, and I just loved being in the middle of everything. And I felt like I had an opportunity to be of influence, left, right, north, and south. And I think we have to own that. We have a unique view of every play, the inside out view of every play. It gives us a vantage point that no other official on the field has. And it gives us that opportunity to bracket the play as it moves down the field and have that inside out view, not to be a ball hawk and watch and focus on the runner, obviously, but to use our instincts to gauge on this play, should I be looking ahead of that runner because I think there might be some action there? Should I be looking behind this runner because there might be some action there? No other position on the field has that. And I think that's one of the greatest ways the umpire can be of service to the crew, by maximizing our vision with that unique inside out view. We're the center of action on every scrimmage play. That gives us the opportunity to control the pile on almost every scrimmage play. I like to own that. I say to myself, this is my pile. And I try to behave in that way, not in an authoritarian way, but in a management way. I want to manage my pile. So by committing to and accepting this unique role, to me, it means accepting a very active role on the field, not just playing our position, but playing a very active role. It's not a passive role. For example, with dead ball action, we should be actively trying to prevent it on every play, not sitting back and waiting to see, did something happen and now I'll respond to it and deal with it, but trying to prevent it on every play. it's not a passive role, it's an active role. We should be driving the engine of the crew. What the heck is the engine of the crew? Well, this is a Mike Dunzelman thing. It's not an association thing, but it is a concept that I want to share with everyone. And I'll do that on the next slide. But it boils down to the umpire and the two flanks driving the pace and the tempo of the game through our efficiency as an engine. The umpire role is not a passive role. It's an active role. Our voice is our best tool to maintain a presence. I want those players to hear my voice on every play. By the end of 4 quarters, I want them to know whether I'm happy, sad, short-tempered, or joking. I want them to know my voice. I want them to know who I am. I want them to get to know me. One point that Scott and Ed and I talked about, when we have a penalty flag down on the ground, in my view, it's those 2 or 3 minutes when the crew is sometimes or is at risk of being the most disconnected. Got a lot of things going on. The covering official is thinking about reporting. The referee is wanting to hear what's going on and is thinking about what they're going to do next. Got officials covering flags. I think we're the most disjointed in those minutes. I want the umpires to step up and take control of those 3 minutes and make sure that the crew is all on the same page. And I want to make sure that the umpire is getting the information they need. There have been times when I've felt like the last to know sometimes. And if you've ever walked off penalty yardage in the wrong direction, you know just how that feels. Or if there's ever been a flag down and you don't know if it's false start in the offense or encroachment in the defense, that's a terrible feeling. And so getting the crew to pause, making sure that the crew knows we've got to communicate well in these 2 or 3 minutes. So the umpire has the opportunity to add a unique voice to the crew, from the locker room to the field and to the post game. And all of that comes with what I said before. We have to own that. We're not just playing 1/4 or 1/5 of the mechanics on the field. We're owning a unique role. We go on to the next slide, Scott. Here's this concept, and it's just mine. If it works for you, fine. The umpire should be responsible for driving the engine of the game. The umpire and two flanks are the engine of a 4-person or even a five-person crew. Several years ago, Mr. Coover was pounding on our referees, tempo, tempo, tempo. Get that ball spotted, get things hacked in, and let's go. Well, now we have a 40-second clock, and things are a little bit different. We don't even have a hack anymore. But the pace of the game is completely dependent on the efficiency of this engine, the umpire and two flanks. So number one, I think the umpire needs to establish that expectation pre-season with his 5-man crew. And before every game, freshman, Pop Warner, doesn't matter, that, hey guys, the 3 of us are the engine and we're going to be driving the pace of this game. It's either going to be a good pace or a bad pace based on our efficiency. So what does that mean? We got to set expectations such as nothing less than perfect progress spots are acceptable. Get the flanks on the same page as far as what forward progress is. Get them on the same page on pinching. Get them on the same page on cross-field mechanics. As the umpire, drive those conversations. Be the one who's driving the efficiency of the engine by being responsible for driving those conversations. And you know what? If you can get your two flanks to be on the same page and spot on when it comes to progress spots in the middle of the field, it's going to pay tremendous dividends where it really matters, and that's down at that goal line. If they can be on the same page when it comes to breaking the plane, or we're short of the plane, well, I don't have to say how important that is to not just the efficiency of the engine, but to the quality of the game and managing our sidelines.
Hey, I want to break in right here, Mike, and reemphasize what you said. When I observe at the high school or college level, and I see that the flanks are, I can't tell whether they're on the same page or not in terms of progress spots and crossfields mechanics. It's not the flanks I go talk to. It's the umpire. Every time I will be in the locker room and I will turn to the umpire and say, how are our spots? Just like Mike said, he will know. He will know. And it's up to him to then get them back on the same pace. I never talk to the flanks.
You know, interestingly, on that topic, you know, my goal is to get them to get great spots, and then I want to take that spot, use that spot. I hear flanks complain from time to time about umpires who don't take their spots, who don't respect the spot that the flank official brought in. I mean, assuming they've got a good spot. If they're wrong, well, that's another story. But I get complimented. I'll just put it that way. I get complimented because I'm taking exactly the spot that they're giving me. Another part of an efficient engine is effective ball retrieval. Get everyone involved on ball retrieval, depending on where the ball is, what type of play it was. Get as many officials involved as need to, so that everybody understands it's our responsibility to get that ball back in. Got to have sharp throws. So make sure you work with each other to get close enough so that a good, solid underhand throw on target happens as a rule. The goal being no balls on the ground. That's the expectation. So perfect spots, perfect tosses. Help your head linesmen manage their chain crew. See if they got a good crew or a bad crew. If they're struggling, work with them. If they're a new official, make sure they understand the tape at the 5-yard mark on the chains. Make sure they're communicating. You know, 5 will get you 1, or we're short, just so that the head linesman is engaged and helping to drive that engine. And then I think encouraging the line judge to have the loudest voice on the field is one of the strongest things we can do. I've been in games where that line judge is just barking out everything as far as our progress and where we're at and what's happening. It just makes the whole tempo and pace of the game a dream. It's like a luxury when you have a line judge who's not afraid to speak up and tell us what they're seeing. It just goes so far. And then lastly, you know, let's be honest, umpires are not always the youngest people on the field or the fastest people on the field, but we don't have to be. What we have to be doing is trying. We have to be trying to get out there to help that ball retrieval throw, you know, be a reasonable distance. We have to be trying to get out to that side zone. We have to be trying to hustle. Sometimes we have injuries, you know, I understand, and there's always exceptions. But umpire hustle is something we just can't ignore. It's got to be part of running the engine of the game. So again, my thought, the engine of the game, if it helps you to drive the efficiency of your crew, I'm happy. Next slide. Part of the role is finding your voice. I've split this up into 2 categories. Finding your voice with the crew. Think about all the things the referees got on their mind. Managing the game, managing coaches, managing game administration, managing the accuracy of the crew and our calls. They've got a ton on their mind. The umpire needs to have a strong voice on the crew, and I like to aim it at crew cohesion. Okay, the umpire can play a really supplementary role to what the referee is doing by focusing our attention on crew cohesion. How are we doing? How are we communicating as a unit, as a crew? I'll just share this one story. First varsity game of the season, I'm on Brian Bortness's crew. We're at the middle of the field waiting for captains to come in for the coin toss. And before the captains get in there, Brian leans into me, he shakes my hand and he says, Mike, I want you to Papa Bear this crew this season. And, I thought, well, that's an interesting choice of words, but I understood exactly what he meant. Be the guy who looks after everyone on the crew, whether it's pulling a guy along, pushing a guy along, or just lifting a guy up, whatever it takes. Be the guy that looks after everyone on the crew. So own that in the preseason, and own it in terms of every four-man game that you work. Prepare your thoughts and expectations and communicate those to the crew. Referees are often thought of as having their pregame. Umpire, what's your pregame? What do you expect of the crew? And are you ready to communicate that? Is the crew ready to take the field? I have prevented guys from going out of the locker room with their zipper down, with their hat in their bag, referees not having a coin, head linesman not having a clip. I own the responsibility to make sure that we're ready to take that field as a crew. I want to have the guts and the integrity to speak up. During the game, be the guy who speaks up, even if it means challenging whether or not we got something right. Be the guy willing to speak up. That's what being the hub of the crew means, having that voice. Keep the referee informed and communicate with other members of the engine. Now, how do you do that? Finding your voice means finding your style. How are you going to communicate? I've seen umpires who every down, they're giving down, distance, status of the clock, weather report. I mean, they're just communicating. I'm not a huge talkative guy, so I'm a little bit more quiet about that, but I'm making sure that every member of that crew is ready to go. And if there's an issue, I'm speaking up. So when I say find your voice, I really mean that sincerely, guys. Find your voice. What works for you, what feels comfortable for you, and what makes you feel like you're maximizing the role of umpire. At halftime, drive that halftime communication. Which players do we need to watch? Which players are starting to get out of control? What trends did you see? What did you see on that particular play? I think we got it right, but we never talked about what did you actually see? I like to drive those kinds of conversations. They're non-threatening. What did you see is not challenging anybody, but it's, to me, setting a tone for the crew for the entire season. It's okay. Actually, it's expected that we're going to talk about stuff. We need to do that. It's the way we get better. And the same post game. While we're having dinner, having a beer, I love to talk about certain plays, dissect them. What did you see? Even if it's awkward, especially if it's awkward. If you find yourself working with a crew and we're not talking about things that we probably should be talking about, that's a red flag for me. And I want to be the one to try to break that ice. And yeah, find your own voice and your own way of doing that. So if the referee is responsible for the performance of the crew, the umpire is responsible for the culture of the crew. And I think that's a great way for the two, the R and the umpire, to work together and to make the crew better. Last step for me, guys, finding your voice with the players. Be that guy who can control the game with just his voice. I should say just their voice, because we are now gender neutral, of course. So be the person who can control the game with just your voice. If I hear a consistent complaint from referees, It's that they'll have an umpire who's not a presence, who's not talking to players, who's not controlling the game with their voice. And so that's something you need to work on if you're not using your voice throughout the game to communicate with players. And that starts with understanding what is your personal communication style. Again, you can't fake it. It shouldn't be something forced. It should be a natural part of who you are. Got to be comfortable using that voice so it's genuine when it comes from you. What do you say to the center in the pregame? You know, it starts there. I introduce myself to him and I ask him to call me Mike, because there's 4 other guys out there with the name Ref. So call me Mike if you need me. I'm going to tell him how I'm going to spot the ball with the laces. I'm going to tell them when I'm going to get away from the ball so they can run their tempo versus when I'm going to stay over the ball. I ask them if they have any questions. And I don't try to make a real show of that conversation with the center, but I'll tell you this, I love it when sometimes other players or even coaches are able to eavesdrop on that conversation, because I try to do it in a very genuine and non-threatening way, a very respectful way. And I think it pays dividends when other players and coaches, like that offensive line coach, can see I'm not out there to be a jerk, to push his guys around. I'm out there to help his players and be a neutral, respectful official. Hearing the umpire's voice in every pile is the root of controlling the game. So what's your style then? Are you quiet? Are you vocal? Are you gruff? Are you friendly? Are you a teacher? I've seen all styles out there, from joking to more of a drill sergeant. Make it work for you. Be comfortable with your voice to players. But the important thing is that they're hearing you every play. When you talk to an offensive lineman about sloppy hands, okay, you're not only preventing a holding flag potentially, but you're preventing a defensive lineman or linebacker from getting frustrated because he's being held and taking a swing at somebody. When you warn a player, keep your head up when you're going into the pile, you're preventing a potential injury. When you're talking to the players, plays over, you're really not stopping anybody from jumping on the pile late. That's really not the point. The point is they're hearing your voice and they know you're watching that pile from this minute until the ball is in my hands and I'm spotting the ball. Your voice in their ear, whether they see you or not, it's like just be in their ear as much as you can be. Knowing your style and knowing your own emotions is important. How do you know when to escalate your communication? How do you know when you're getting frustrated? How do you know when to go from talking to somebody to escalating and saying, hey, this is really getting to be a problem and we got to do something about this, or things aren't going to go your way here, something bad's about to happen. Tracking that with players, understanding where you're at and where they're at, and communicating that, very, very important. Knowing when it's time to talk, knowing when it's time to throw a flag. Important to learn that and get to your style of taking control of the game with your words versus the flag. And then not all players respect authority today. Being authoritarian is working less and less and less effectively. Players are more inclined to push back and fight you and get angry at you. So are you being wiser than them when you're trying to defuse a situation? I really envy umpires who never lose their cool, who can work through a problem situation in a joking manner or a friendly manner and just kind of a talking with them manner. I struggle with that. Every preseason, I have the same goal. I don't want to lose my temper with a player this year. And next year I have the same goal, because I lost my temper at least once. It's just part of my nature. And I just try to stay on top of it and get better at it. So, hey, that wraps up my slides. I hope this didn't feel too much lecturish. It really was just Mike Gunzelman's brain dump. I would just ask you to ask yourself, are you owning the role of umpire and all that it can be? Are you driving the engine of the crew? And are you finding your voice with players and with the crew? And hey, good luck with this season. Love to all umpires.
Yeah, we sometimes get in the middle of everything. Thanks, Mike. Just want to add a point. Everything that we just heard from Mike and everything that we just saw, I think that it applies regardless of the level that you're working. If you're working a 4-man youth game, if you're working a 5-man varsity game, everything that we just heard is something that the umpires have to own for that crew. And as Mike said, develop the culture of that crew. It could be for just one game. It could be for the entire season, or it could be a triple header on a Saturday. It's really is important to be yourself, find yourself on the football as an official, and make yourself a key component of that crew. Now, that being said, does anybody have any questions, comments, insights that they want to share based on what we just went through?
Just wanted to share that Mike had a call on one of my instructional videos that I was putting together. And so I contacted him and I said, Mike, this kind of seems like a gray area hold. It was Grossmont, you might remember, Mike. And he kind of chuckled. He said, yeah, that's not one I would throw, but I talked to him 3 plays in a row and that was it. I wasn't going to talk anymore. And I just went, correct call. Thank you.
It's fun being in the middle.
We do have a lot of control. So we just heard some philosophies and some ideas about how an umpire fits with the crew and what they can control within the crew and how they can support the crew. As Mike said, how we push and pull sometimes our crewmates, ourselves, sometimes even getting the white hats out of trouble, but also controlling the game. And some of the things I want to talk about now is some of the key mechanics for an umpire on the field. Mike talked a lot about communication with the crew and communication with the player. I want to get into some specifics on what we need to look for and how we can affect the game in a positive way using certain mechanics and certain keys for an umpire. As Mike said, as an umpire, you use your voice a lot. I've worked many games as an umpire that I never had my whistle in my mouth. Now, some people think that might be a bad thing, but if you can control the action with your voice and your presence and your demeanor, you actually start, in my opinion, you start to gain a little bit more respect from the players because you're part of the game in kind of in a personal way, because they're hearing the voice, not this loud tweet. And we want to make sure that as an umpire, we have that unique perspective. As Mike said, we're in the middle of the field. We see sometimes inside out, but we see all of that. So our dead ball officiating as an umpire is different than it is a flank, at least it is in my opinion, because we're more engaged, and you have to be engaged with the players during dead ball. You just don't put the ball down. You just don't walk away with your head down. You spot the ball and you start talking to players. You start talking to the linebackers. You start looking to see where the offense is going. You're looking behind the white hat. Those are all things that the umpire can influence better than anybody else on the field. In fact, in some cases, the only place that it can be influenced or controlled is via the umpire. So make sure you're looking at your dead ball, make sure you're looking at the colors, make sure they're separated, get your voice, get your body where it needs to be so you can influence that action. There's a lot of talk too about catch, no catch, fumble, no fumble, and sometimes an umpire can help with progress. You need to work with your crew on how you're going to do that. Everybody has different ways of doing it. Mike says, find your voice, find your demeanor, find your physical presence on the field, what is comfortable for you. When I work as an umpire, preseason, pre-game, I talk to my flanks, I talk to my white hat, and sometimes I'm talking to my back judge if I'm working a 5-man. And there's certain mechanics that I do. If I have catch, no catch, because I turn quickly and I see it, my voice comes out and I make it very, very big if it's no catch. If I'm sure about it, it's very, very big. If it's no catch. If it's a catch, I'm looking at covering official. I physically go to them if I need to, hustle over to them if I see the deer in the headlights. But you have to look for those things, and you have to build that relationship, as Mike said, with your crew, so that your physical presence and demeanor on the field makes a difference there. Personally, if I have progress and I look up and my flanks don't know really what it is, because that pile of, that, as we say, the pile of humanity in the middle of the field, that the flanks can't pick out the ball, umpires can sometimes have that. So step up and work the communication with your crew so that you're giving them a hint of where it's at so that it can key off of you. You don't have primary responsibility for it. They have it, but when you can help them out, step up and help them out, give them an indication with that. Mike talked about setting rapport and talking to players, but there's another thing about where you're at and how you work with the players, particularly on the defensive side. In our mechanic, we have our umpire on the defensive side. Don't be that umpire that says, no, this is my spot. I am going to stay here. You have to work around me. I've worked with umpires that do that. I've seen a lot of umpires that do that. And quite frankly, they get hurt. Be flexible, work with your linebackers, work with your offensive, and understand where they're at so you can put yourself in a position where you can work the window, you can see the snap, and you can get out of the way where necessary and get your head where it needs to be, get your vision where it needs to be, right? That type of behavior on the field will set the right tone with the players. I've seen too many umpires and say, no, this is where I'm going to be. Everybody gets upset, and by a third quarter, they're yelling at each other. It happens. Don't do that. One of the things too that I think that an umpire, as far as communication is concerned and field mechanics, is sometimes, as Mike said, that 1 to 2 minutes when we're enforcing a penalty, where a flag's on the field, we know what it is, but we're so focused on communication and we're so focused on what that play was, what the number was, who's doing what, we sometimes forget that there's certain options. The umpire is the one, because he's going to mark it off. In my opinion, you should be thinking about what that is and what the options are. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3 options to it. We're the ones that should know that. We're the ones that should position ourselves so we can communicate that to our white hat and also communicate it to the flank that has that option, right? When I work white hat, sometimes I just get so focused on what the announcement is, I forget about the options, and the umpire being in the right position to talk to the white hat and hustle over to a point to or communicate an OTO to your flank is something that you need to do. Umpire owns that, we own enforcement. Mike talked about the engine, right? And how the umpire and the flanks work together. Part of that is pregame, part of that is preseason. It's always understanding that game. We know that the umpire is the hub. We know that the umpire controls some of that flow of the game, but the umpire is the one that controls the flow of the game as it meets the game. Let the game dictate what's going on and participate in that flow of the game and get your crew to follow you by your ball spots, by your communication on the side, by your hustle to the sideline. All of that sets the tone, and it's set by the umpire regardless of the level. Questions? All right. As an umpire, some of the smallest things that we do make the biggest difference on the field. It's one of the biggest things, and we might talk a little bit about an umpire that's vocal. It's first down, clock is running, whatever is happening prior to or the dead ball. But there's other little things that we do. When you get a spot from the flank official, number one, don't argue, don't question, put the ball down where that flank official says, this is a spot, put it down. If you have a question about it later, talk about it at halftime, talk about it post game, but don't argue on the field. Don't get into a situation where everybody's questioning everybody else. Don't do that. Be firm on what that is and let your flank official know that you got their spot. So they can get off, they can get into their pre-snap, they can do what they need to do, and you can get the ball down, get back into your pre-snap and talk with the players on the field. So point, let them know whatever works for you and your flank, but make sure that it's big, make sure that they know it, and make sure that everybody else on the field knows it, because it builds confidence in what we are doing and how we act on the field. Mike talked about talking to the centers beforehand, giving him his name. Hey, I'm Scott, I'm gonna be working with you tonight. This is how I spot the ball. Do you have any questions? Do you call the plays? What's your set? What's your cadence? Get to know them, make that personal. And what I have found, what works very well for me is, even if I'm not writing anything meaningful down, if I take a piece of paper or I take my notebook, and when I'm talking to the center, I write his number down and I'm listening to what he says and I'm jotting something down, that simple act builds confidence and rapport with that center. Most of the time, when they come out for the first snap, they're going to ask you, hey, how are you doing? Everything ready for go? We're ready to go. You build that rapport by taking that affirmative step. And like Mike said, you don't care if anybody else overhears, that's fine. But whatever you do for one side, mechanically make sure you do for the other. Don't spend 5 minutes with one center and 20 seconds with the other center. They will notice that. It's not necessarily something that we have control over, but when we do, and if you do, and try to make sure that you do, make sure that you're spending the same amount of time on both sides, getting that information down. And getting back to communication, I like to find out if this, do we have, who's the number one center, who's the number two center, who's the long snapper, right? And is there a number two long snapper? So I like to get that information down, so when somebody comes in, now I know I have something else to look for. Because if I've been working, a half of football with one center, and the next center comes in and he's left-handed and the first center was right-handed, well, things get a little different for me. So I like to find out that information, and I communicate it to my flanks, and I communicate it to my wide hat. They may not want that information. It may not make a difference to them, but it's very important to in my mind, it's very important to communicate, because that one little bit of piece of information may be important later in the game. I also make sure that I know what the numbers are, right? We all know that there's numbering exceptions and what the number requirements are, but I want to know what those numbers are, and I commit that to memory, because when they come out and I see something different, something's going to happen on that play, or something happened that I didn't catch, and I want to make sure that I do. So know the numbers, know the numbering exceptions that are there, and when something changes, red flags should go up, and you should think about what's happening during that play, right? Consistent signaling from an umpire is, in my opinion, is extremely important to the cadence of the game, right? When we're enforcing something 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to do it the same way, the same time, in that, and the same process going off, that helps with everybody else on the crew to get into their rhythm and to get to a comfortable state. Because when you're doing it different each time, they're not sure when to look or what's happening, because they thought something else was going on. So develop your rhythm, develop your consistency, and focus on that at every game that you do, not just the youth, not just the varsity. Every game that you do, you should be doing the same thing the same way, so that you're consistent in helping your crew out. So Mike talked about a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit more, but a little bit more focus on what to do on ball handling. Everybody is different. Like I just said, you need to be consistent with what your mechanics are and what you're doing, but you have to work with a crew. As an umpire, I'm fairly active. If the ball is a 40-yard incomplete on a freshman game, I know I've got to go get that ball. It's 4-man mechanics. I got flanks that are dealing with sidelines that are out of control. I know I need to go get that ball. But before that game, I set the expectation with my white hat that I'm going to go get that ball, and I'm going to get it back. And expect the white hat to participate in that set. It's 4-man mechanics. It's deep pass. This is what we have to do. It's what we just have to do it in a 4-man. 5-man, I know my back judge. I know where he's going to be and what he's going to do. Again, our mechanics manual talks about ball handling and the specific mechanics about that. But as an umpire, we set the tone for the cadence. If we're walking to go to a spot to get the relay, then everybody else is going to walk. But if I'm standing there because I've hustled down there and I'm waiting for that, I guarantee you it's going to make the other people on your crew hustle and get it in. And they're going to, at the end of the game, they're going to enjoy the fact that you just had a 2.5-hour game, not a 3.5-hour game because you hustled with the ball. Make sense? It's all about cadence and flow, and the umpire, by their hustle and purposeful movement on the field, will make that difference, and people, the crew, will follow your lead. So, demeanor. Mike said it. I'm going to talk about what the mechanics look like. The umpire is the center in our game. We are the center of almost every play. There's few exceptions, but almost every play, that play revolves, doesn't necessarily, we're not engaged in the play, but it is around us, whether it's a run to the left, a run to the right, it's a pass in the middle, we're in the middle of that. Because we're in the middle of that and that specific view that we have that ability to say, okay, this is what we saw, this is what it is. If we have to slow down, and this is the ball, this is a comment of a ball on the ground, calm all around. If the ball's ready to go, play is ready to go, we're ready to go, we don't hear a bunch of noise from the players and coaches. But at the same time, there are some times where we want to get it down quick. And we have to recognize what the game is doing and the action on that previous play. We had a run, people are getting a little excited, it was a first down, the chains are moving, we get the ball down, let's get going to the next play. But sometimes we want to slow down. Something strange has happened in that play, and you can tell, sometimes I can tell, that we have a flank that's processing something. They're going, what happened? I'm not sure if it was out of bounds or was here, not sure where the spot is. So we have to recognize, because of that specific view that we have of the game, we have to recognize when we should slow down or take a breath or allow the crew to take a breath, or when we need to get it down and get going and get this game moving. Story from last year, there was a play, I wasn't sure what happened. There was the ball on the ground, recovered, and nobody on the crew was necessarily saying it's going, which way it was going. It wasn't second down, it wasn't going the other way. There was kind of a lull in the communication. And as a white hat, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on, and my brain just blanked out. My umpire, ball's down, second down, we're good to go, getting me back into the game, back into that next thing. Again, our position on the field as an umpire allows us to see all of those things and control that cadence, control that tempo, and we need to do it with authority. Pre-snap, a little bit different in the upper levels, because we don't have substitution mechanics, we don't have substitution, but we need to make sure that we have the center and the quarterback's attention, because they're looking at us. If the white hat is distracted or something else is going on, we need to be able to step up and hold that up appropriately. That is our responsibility. We don't want to do it in a way that we're intrusive, but we want to make sure that we have their attention. They know to look at us, and they know that if we're holding them up, they're going to hold up and we don't have a problem. There's a lot of fast tempo offenses out there now, and we have some young kids out there, 16-year-olds, that are told by their coach, get on the ball, let's get going, let's get going, let's get going. So we have to recognize that and develop your presence on the field, your demeanor with that center pregame that we talked about, but also develop it during the game and hold it up where necessary. The worst games that I've ever worked, frankly, I was one of the umpire. I was the umpire in one game that was not a good game. The crew did not have a good game. The game did not go well, and it was all because, in my opinion, because I had a bad attitude. There's no doubt about it. I went into that game with a bad attitude. I wasn't feeling well, and it showed. And everybody keyed off of that. Again, we're the center of the field. So if you're going to have a bad game, I guarantee it's going to be in part because you're not in the game and hustling and making that game yours. I go to every game as an umpire, and I'm going to be the one that hustles the most, that in the right positions the most, and has no voice at the end of the game because I'm using it every down, every play. Your crew will feed off of that. The game will feed off of that. The players, the coaches will feed off of it. So don't be indifferent. Don't pick the ball up in a lazy way and just kind of drop it on the ground. Be confident for what you're doing. Be positive in the way that you're doing it, and be firm in your actions. And it's going to make that game go so much better, so much further. This is something that we've been taught before. I know Steve has taught this, and it's a very important concept for me as an umpire, because I have to recognize that there's a paradigm shift, right? Because I'm talking to his players. Unlike a flank official who's talking to a receiver or to a cornerback that's out there, on the line, off the line, or might say something about it. I'm in the middle of the field as an umpire, and I'm talking to his players. I'm talking to the coach's players. I'm talking to the center. I'm talking to the guards. Hey, that was a hold, but it didn't have any effects. Make sure you keep your hands off, or whatever it happens to be. I'm talking to that player, and the coach is 20, 30 yards away from him and doesn't know what's going on. So they see that and go, hey, wait a minute here. So you have to have the right demeanor of that, because as Steve says, during the week, coaches have control. When that kickoff goes off, they're no longer in control. Their players and their actions are the players and the actions. Coach can't do anything about it. The tempo of that game, that's controlled a lot by us. So we take control over something that the coach has had it for 5 days. We have to be aware of that and respectful of that. And our demeanor needs to present that we respect that and respect the game, the players, and the coaches. Fair? So keys and transitions. One of the biggest challenges I think that umpires have right now, and Steve talked about it before, and is when we've gone to a zone read, right? We got our keys at our snap, and as the play develops, we have different keys and we have different zones that we move to. An umpire, in my opinion, is the one that has the broadest areas and changes within that. Guard, center, guard. We have the snap, we clear the snap, we go to zone, and then we go deep, and then we're moving down the field. All of that changes for an umpire all of the time. And what I see for my mechanics, when I look at film and look at myself, far too often, in my opinion, we're watching the action on the runner. And most of the time, an umpire doesn't have that. So force yourself to get to where your keys are and your transitions and get off the ball, especially if it's outside or if it's pass. I run up the middle, okay, it's coming right at you, no problem there. But I see far too often where players are going outside, especially if it's going to the umpire's side of the field. Instead of watching that runner or that quarterback go, we need to get quickly to the outside and watch that block on the outside. Watch the action that's there, because that's going to be the block, or that's going to be the action that either frees up that touchdown and it was a hold, or it was a blind side because we didn't get there in time. So understand our mechanics on where we're supposed to be looking and work to get that. Work to understand how that play is presented to you. If it's unbalanced, anticipate, don't guess, but anticipate where it's at. Don't be surprised, but maybe you take a step back, maybe you take a step to the side so that you can work that window and get to the place where it needs to be, right? There are certain plays like PATs and field goals where action at the line, as an umpire, we're kind of taught we got guard, center, guard, right? In our 5-man mechanics, if it's in a certain place, we're under the pipe and we still have the snap. But when plays break down, we need to understand that the flanks are going to get overwhelmed. And I don't mean that in a negative way. If a field goal or PAT breaks down and starts to go to his side, now the flank has to worry about progress. He has to worry about goal line. He has to worry about other actions. So we as an umpire with that inside out experience need to start taking a look at that inside out action in a wider perspective and be prepared to step up and say, did you see this? Or what did you have, as Mike was saying before, not in a accusatory way, but combining their view and your view can get those calls right. But we have to be prepared to help in those situations by moving our eyes and moving our body. Dig is one of my favorites. It's a favorite, but it's also a situation, particularly in a 5-man crew, or 4-man, I should say. It's even worse than a 4-man, where things can get ugly really, really fast. I don't know any umpire that hasn't gone into dig and find the ball and find possession to find out that they're digging for something that's not there because the ball's 10 yards away and it came out and we didn't see it. So have the conversations with your crew on what your mechanics are going to be. Our mechanics say closest official is the one that's digging. That's typically going to be the umpire, sometimes at the back judge if it's something deep. So know when you're going to dig, know how you're going to do it. Personally, I find ball, I grab hand. If I got somebody's hand and possession of the ball, I'm grabbing their hand, because that way I know when they come up, I know who it is. Communicate.
In Ontario, or there's, so when you don't return it to the same place.
You gotta do it one way. Oh, I see.
I don't know.
I got it, Steve. It was Kevin Smith. So know when you're going to dig, know how you're going to do it, communicate with the crew what your approach is to that. Find something that you're comfortable with, and be consistent with it. So we talked about
Scott,
Yes.
Let me interrupt you right there and just remind people that in the mechanics manual, there's a whole section on digging, on fumbles. Go back and look at that section. It would be good for everyone to do.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you. Because what we don't want to do is have 3 people digging, right? And what we don't want to do is have 3 people not doing it. So the mechanics specifically says who's doing what, where, and how. And make sure you know that, make sure you communicate that. Because the umpires have that inside out view, I think more than any other position, at least for me, when I work other positions, there's certain ways that you work to get the windows. Most of the time it's by moving up and down the field or backing out a little bit. As an umpire, sometimes you can't always do that. You can't back up because you're backing up into a linebacker. You can't move left or right because you're running into somebody or getting in the way. So it's a combination of feel, it's a combination of experience, and it really is knowing that you have to work as an umpire to constantly work to get the window that you need to work your keys and work your transitions. Look to where you need to, but get a window to do that. So as an example, our mechanics has moved the umpire back a little bit and a little bit wider than we traditionally have, and we've done that, 1, to be a little safer, but 2, because of our zone reads, our zone officiating plays that are going to the umpire's side. It allows the umpire to step out, take a drop step, and turn. Not a lot of movement, and get their eyes where they need to be, right? Get that window. But sometimes you have to move a little bit more because you have a pulling guard or you have a tight end that's trailing across. So constantly think about working that window. But sometimes as an umpire, it's counter to what we would do as a flank, right? We still want to keep that 7, 8, 9 yard distance between where our keys are or where our zone is at, so we can have a good view of it. But sometimes we have to move up a little bit, like on a pass play, right? Where it used to be as an umpire, we would hustle up to the line of scrimmage. We don't do that anymore. We move up and keep that cushion, keep that distance, taking a snapshot of where the line of scrimmage is. That allows us to see the wide, it allows us to see people releasing downfield, and it allows us to see a broader action that could help the white hat if the ball is tipped or those types of things. again, the umpire's position, because of that inside positioning, has to work a little bit differently to constantly get, or to work to get the window for officiating. And sometimes because of where we're at, this is perfect. To me, it's a good example of where we're at on the field and where the ball is snapped, the relative position. Ball is snapped on the left hash, and it is a kick play. It's a punt. It's a line of scrimmage. We're punting. We're left hash, so we're kind of in the middle of the field, and the play breaks down and goes to the sideline. We can't keep our cushion because we're going to get crushed in. The other opposite of that is it comes our way. In that state, we can stay where we're at because it's coming our way and we can still have that wide view. So understand where you're at on the field and understand what the plays are, so you can kind of think about, put it in the back of your head, what your escape route is and where that play is going to go, so you can be in the right position at the right time. Umpires in the middle of the field, I think that we have to adjust. As I said, we have to adjust our position more than any other position on the field. So don't get, you cemented feet. You have to be moving, you have to be on your toes, and you have to be thinking with your head on a swivel. I've seen far too many umpires get hit because they didn't have their head on a swivel. I've seen far too many umpires miss a call or miss action because they didn't anticipate where they would have to go. Let the play develop and move with the play, and understand that that's what you have to do to maintain that inside out. Make sense?
Hey, Scott, I have a quick question. Nate
Yep.
Sweat here.
Yep.
Kind of a new umpire. I have a quick question about what you just said about moving towards line of scrimmage on pass plays. And I understand some of the mechanics around that, but can you just explain more of, like, kind of your thought when you were kind of inching closer to the line of scrimmage when there's a pass play, and where you're kind of trying to get to and making sure you're in the best position during those plays? Because I know there's a couple of things I've been told differently around that, so I just kind of want to get clarification on that.
Okay, I'll tell you what my thought process is and how I do that. We'll ask Mike. There's a couple other umpires. Jay's on here, Gilly's on here, so there's a couple others we'll try to get some input from. But for me, it all starts in the pre-snap, right? It really depends on the game. It depends on the situation. But if I know, or am very sure that it's going to be a pass, right, I'm a little bit, maybe I'll take a step or two up in the pre-snap, right, as I'm getting ready for that play, because I think it's going to be a pass, so I don't want to have to get past anybody. And I also take a look to see where any trailing receivers might be, right? If I think it's going to be a pass and this team likes to do some trails, or pull that tight end across, I'm going to get an idea where they're at, so I can kind of get my wide vision there. Now when the pass goes off, I guard, center guard, clear the snap, pass goes up, they start backing up a little bit. It's typically what happens. I don't start moving up immediately. I've already taken a snapshot in my head of what the line of scrimmage is, right? I know where that restraining line is in my head. So I get this feeling that, okay, this is where it's at. I take a wide view and I see if anybody's releasing downfield. If they're releasing downfield, I take a look at what that snapshot is. But I start moving up as they're moving back. As they're taking a step or two back, I'm taking a step or two forward, keeping that view, keeping my eye on the center, the guard, center guard. And I'm also looking maybe a little bit wider to the tackle, depending on where the quarterback is and what my wide hat is doing. So that's what my philosophy, or what my process is. It's all in the pre-snap, knowing where things are at, knowing where players are at, knowing where they're typically going to do, and I'll slide up with them, with them being the offensive line. Now, when that starts to break down, as a white hat, we're taught to look for bad colors, right? white. Okay, blue's breaking through, and that's where as a white hat, my focus is going to be. It's just the opposite for an umpire. We're looking for we're looking for the color, but it's the opposite color. And all of a sudden we see another color. That means somebody's broken through that line. And I want to then focus on what action takes place there. Is there that grab and restrict? Is there a takedown or something that happens there? But I don't want to be too close to it. I don't know if that helped, Nathan, but that's my process.
Yeah, I like the concept of mirroring alignment as they go back. You're kind of keeping that distance. I like that visual. Thanks.
The key for me there is make sure you get that snapshot. Make sure you know where that line of scrimmage is. Not stare at it and say, okay, I'm hyper focused on that line of scrimmage, but know that the 21 is the line, is the restraining line, right? So if you're starting at the 27 and you take 3 steps up, it's 4 in front of you. If you got a lineman that's equal with you, now we have a problem, right? So it's not that hustle there and then start looking around. It's no, just keep that same view. They go back, you go forward. They coming at you, because that's what happens sometimes too. Because you don't want to get up there too tight and have it be a middle screen, right? Or a draw. Well, they drop back and now all of a sudden they're coming at you and you're standing right in front of them. Bad juju. Does anybody else have a different approach or want to share their thoughts on that?
I agree with everything that you said, Scott. You just added one of the things that I was going to add, which is you got to be aware of screen and draw, because the deer in the headlights feeling is a very bad feeling out there. So I'm glad you threw that in there. And then I was just going to emphasize, once the ball crosses the line of scrimmage, everything that happens on the offensive side of that ball is not our business. It just doesn't matter anymore. So focus on that pivot to help out with a trap or incompletion that the flanks and the back judge might need help on.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And that's that last point, really good point. Once that pass goes, right, we got to change our focus. As Garth said, there isn't a hold behind you, because a hold has to have an impact on the play. And once that pass goes out, that hold means nothing, right?
And I think
If there's
that just
personal,
doesn't matter anymore.
no,
Yeah.
it doesn't. Personal fouls and things like that, either the off flank, if it's going to the side, or the white hat's going to get that. So we need to go start helping out the rest of the crew, particularly in our 4-man. We can help out so much if we accept that responsibility and move with purpose on the field. My opinion, no other official on the field in a 4-man game has to understand move with purpose any more than an umpire.
I'm going to share a film in next week's instructional video. It's a film that I put together with Orange County. It's from a state championship game in which the umpire pivots and a targeting occurs right in front of him. So my point is, once you pivot, Mike was very clear, and so was Scott, you're looking for a low pass where it could have skipped or trapped, or it was a completion where you can help on that. But also be ready to turn around and officiate blindside block, excessive contact to a defenseless receiver or player, a block in the back on an interception. There's all kinds of actions that can happen after you pivot. So be ready to officiate.
The one that I get the most that nobody else sees, and they really can't, because it's usually off ball, it's that block below the waist, right? And sometimes it's on the defense, right? They're coming in low, taking out that lead blocker, taking somebody else passes there, and they're taking out another receiver. An umpire will see that more than anybody else in 4- and 5-man game. So thanks, Steve, for that. Absolutely look for those things. And again, that's knowing where our position is on the field and getting that best look because of where we're at. Again, moving with purpose and what we're going to do. Jay, you had a question?
No, not really a question. I was just going to add also on the low blocks. Don't be thinking it's offense that's going to be throwing low blocks. A lot of times the DBs or the corners will come up and do a low block on a pulling guard. So you probably have the best look at that as umpire. as a low block from defense. So don't get in the mindset that the low blocks are only going to come from offense.
Good point, Jay. And again, that's a lot of what we're going to see. Again, in 5-man, if it's a pass, it's a swing, wheel route. Bat judge could typically help on that, but they're going to be going to ball anyway. So we can really help on those things, and just understand that we have to work that window. We have to work the view, and it's every play, because we are the center of every play. I talked a little bit about, lackadaisical type actions and movements, right? When we do things, we do it with a purpose, we do it with a reason. When we're moving to get the window, we need to move. It's a combination of moving where you need to get it, but not moving too much, right? We see more. This has been pounded into my head, and I absolutely agree and believe it, that we see more when we're not moving, when our eyes are bouncing, or when our head's moving, or we're doing those things. We're not going to see as much. So don't be afraid to work a window where you can see through a gap, or see through players and not have to get all the way around it. So try to say where you can move purposefully and not just running around because you gotta get to something. See where you need to see, work where you need to see, but don't move too much. And not moving too much is the second last point. Sometimes you can move and you can take yourself out of the play. I've done it too many times. I'm embarrassed sometimes when I do it, because I see a play coming to me. This is the most difficult play for me as an umpire. I'm sitting back there, play it's coming to my zone. I know that I have to get outside and see that, and I start to move, and I end up running right behind a linebacker, or right behind that safety or cornerback that's coming up, and now I can't see crap, right? I took myself out of position because I was worried too much of getting there. Sometimes not moving, or moving again with purpose, is going to get you where you need to be. And as we just talked about, you don't want to be moving up to the line when that center screen or that draw comes up and you're standing right in front of that center as that running back comes right through that gap and runs you over. It has happened, it will happen, and there's, I'm not gonna say there's nothing you can do about it, because there is something you can do about it. Be careful of what you're doing, think about what's happening in the play, and think about where you're at. Any questions on understanding our mechanics and how they put us in the position to help the crew and influence the cadence of the game, and can make everything run smoother if we know and accept what our responsibilities are?
Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mike.
Okay. Question, you talked about signaling to the crew on unbalanced lines. Can you give me an example of what you're talking about?
So one of the things that I do is my hand is down, right, on the weak side, and it's closed. So I'll kind of like shake it with my fist closed, saying that we've got, we've got an unbalanced line there. What I typically try to do is go to I'm looking at, so I do that. I'll look to weak side first, make sure that that flank official knows that, hey, we have an unbalance here. Sometimes that makes a difference on the formation, but it also gives them an idea that, hey, we got strong side other way. I'm going to have a wider view here, and I'm going to prep my mind to do that. And then I'll look over to the strong side and see if I can get eye contact, right? And just let them know that it's there. So my signal is down, hand closed, saying this is the side that it's weak on. It also, in 5-man, it gives the back judge, who may not have picked it up, obviously they should, but they may not have picked it up, because we could have. I've been in games where we've gone unbalanced and the tight end is off and the tackle is outside, but it's really, really tight. So tight end is effectively in the interior, but they're off the yard, so they're still eligible. And the line judges, I'm sorry, the back judge is like, where's my tight end? Where's my key? What's happening here? So that helps there too. That help, Mike?
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Hey, Scott, Mike Andrews is asking about pre-snap stance, standing straight up versus hands on knees versus in a crouch. I look at that as a matter of total personal choice. I like to be in more of a standing up position because I know that even if I was hands on knees, once the snap goes off, I'm liable to just stand up anyway. So that's just avoiding that movement. My focus, of course, is making sure I'm able to see that snap very, very clearly, whether I'm standing straight up or if I'm leaning over a little bit. I just feel physically more comfortable standing more straight up than in a crouch or hands on knees. But I see guys working in all different pre-snap positions.
I think that you hit two of the three keys in my mind. One is you have to make sure that you have your window. You have responsibilities for the snap. You need to be able to see the action by the center. So if you have a nose guard that short, stocky, standing over, that's 4-point stance over the ball, you can't, in my opinion, you can't stand behind them. Right? You can get to the side so you can see that. But if you have a linebacker there, you have somebody that might be moving, now you have to do something different. Plenty of times I've been directly behind the nose guard and I'm crouched real low so I can see that action on the ball and get a wide view of the guards. So primary key, snap. We have to clear the snap. You have to see that. The second part is whatever you're comfortable in can move, right? I do something I think it's a little unique, at least I've been told that. As an umpire, I have a very long lanyard. I don't like finger whistles. A lot of umpires do. I don't like finger whistles because I can't catch the ball as well. So I have a very long lanyard. I have my whistle in my hand and my hands are on my hip, but I'm not resting on them. And my hand is actually, I have my flag because I have my flag on my right side. My whistle and my hand are on the flag. Because if I have action, I need to shut it down real quick. My flag's coming out as I put my whistle in and kill it. That's my stance. And I'm also up on my toes because I think that gives me I'm better able to move from that stance. I don't have to get into that and then move. That's how I do it. As long as you can see, as long as you are comfortable, and as long as you can move, the stance is what it is. The worst thing to do, in my opinion, is one, not have the right view, and two, look like you don't care. Because a lot of officials will stand there with their hands on their knees and their head down, right? They're waiting for it, or they're resting on their knees, or they're resting on their hips, or they're just standing like they don't care. That happens, especially if you're doing 3 games on a Saturday at 115 degrees on the field. You're going to get worn out. I get that, but think about how your appearance is, because that will be received by coaches, players as you don't care. So that's my take. I don't know if anyone else has a different opinion on it. But again, there are certain types of actions, false start, right? The snap infractions, that line of scrimmage stuff that we need to shut down. Personally, I want to shut it down as quick as I can. No question, we're shutting this down, no delay. Because far too many times when I was early in my career, I didn't have my whistle ready. I didn't have the flag ready. Something would happen and I go, oh crap, now I got to find my whistle and do all that kind of crap. And it just, the play is going off, and I don't like that. So I'm in a position where I can get the whistle, get the flag, and get up to the ball and shut it down real quick if I need to. Now, once the play goes, go ahead.
I'm a finger whistle user, but I found that I've gotten a little slower getting that finger whistle into my mouth to kill a false start. So I've gone to 2 whistles. I've got a whistle in my mouth, and if I need to kill it, I can just kill it right then and there. Once the play goes off, I spit the whistle out and I'm back on the finger whistle.
I did that for 11 years. I had my whistle in my mouth as an umpire. I played trumpet. I have control over that. I didn't have it. I didn't think I had any problem with that. And I had no whistle in my mouth. As soon as the snap cleared, I spit it out and there's no issue. I did that until I worked a game where a linebacker shifted and went right in front of me and ripped that whistle out of my mouth. And I had, a dentist bill of $150 copay.
Okay.
So that's why I don't have it in my mouth anymore. A lot of people do. I get that. I used to do it. I just happen to have an incident where I'm like, you know what, I can, if I have it in my hand and I'm ready to go, right, and I'm ready for that, I'm ready to jump on that, then I can get to it pretty quick, I think. Anybody else have a different approach, or?
10 minutes to go.
All right. So we're going to go through some things here real quick, and we're not really talking. I'm going to take over Ed's portion of this because you got tied up. One of the things that Ed wanted to focus on, and Mike and I have talked with Ed, and it's really, really important from an umpire's perspective. It's not that it's any less important from many other positions perspective, but because we're in the center of the action, because we control or dictate the culture of the crew, rules knowledge for an umpire is paramount to a good umpire, or to a definition of good umpire. And there isn't just one thing. Like sometimes as a back judge, you say you got to know all the, all rule 6, you got to know all the kicking rules and enforcements in that. Line of scrimmage needs to know X, Y, and Z. All rules are important. Umpires got to know them. You just have to know them. You're going to save the crew. And you, again, your rules knowledge not only influences how the game progresses, because we don't take a minute, we can take it 30 seconds to get into an enforcement, particularly ones that we know. As an umpire, if we have a false start, if I call a false start and I'm on radio, say we got a false start at 68 white, when my white hat turns to make the signal, we got a false start white, I want on the ball, moving the stake, moving the ball down and ready to go, backed out by the time my white hat gets done with the announcement, with the signaling. To do that, we have to know the rules. We have to know the enforcement. We have to ask all of these things of ourselves and our crews and make sure that we're on top of it. So that's what this portion is to kind of go through and think, are you thinking about what these mean? So in rule 1, what's the difference between a hash mark and a yard line? Okay, why is that important for an umpire? Well, it's important for an umpire because it can set the tone. Does everybody understand when we say we start on a yard line? When we start a first down, we put it on a yard line. We're not half, we're not on the other ways. We started on the yard line, right? Everybody understands that, right? I don't think there's any confusion there. What about on a kick, on a punt that is fair caught and the player is moving, right? And he's moving between the 20 and the 21 yard line. Where do we want to put that ball? Back judges, where do we want to put that ball? As an umpire, I'm telling my crew that on a play like that, put the ball on the 20, put it on a 21, or don't guess where it's at, put it on a big line, and we go, because nobody knows, nobody cares, and it doesn't make a difference in that game. So although it's the back judge's responsibility to say, hey, this is where we're at, and put the flag down, and it's the line judge to say, okay, this is what the progress was. Talk to them, influence that, and know what the differences are there and why it makes a difference. We have responsibility as an umpire. We have responsibility for legal, illegal rulings on players' equipment. Do we know what those are? It's in our mechanics. It's our responsibility to know those things. I'm asking everybody that's on this call, everybody's thinking about being an umpire. Do you know those things? Do you know what the rules are for knee pads, for shoulder coverings, for streamers and towels? What's the marking on the face? We need to know that because it's our responsibility. And I would even go so far to say, and again, I've heard this in our association, I've heard it plenty of time, we need to be consistent with the rules, not what we think or what we feel. I don't want to deal with it today. We can't do those things. So know what those rules are. As an umpire, you have responsibility to make rulings on that and be consistent to help all of our crews so that when we go out there and have a season, we don't get this, well, last week they said, we don't want that, understand that. Know what our definitions are. I think that the one definition, I shouldn't say definition, but a ruling that I hear a lot of people reference is momentum. Now, momentum has a very specific definition. It applies in a very specific way. And I think that we use that I'll say incorrectly, but not in a way that it's meaningful or has any impact on a game. When it comes crunch time, we think we get it right. But it's really important that we all are on the same page in a crew and talking about what's happening and where it's going. So as an umpire, as you're having those crew conversations, as your white hat is leading some of those conversations, it's our job to make sure that we know what those definitions are so we can get them right. Because if we get them wrong, it affects everything else within the enforcement and the play of the game. So make sure we know what that is. Make sure we know what neutral zone expanded is. I'm not going to ask anybody, but do everybody on this call, do you really know what neutral zone expanded is? And more importantly, when it influences our calls and what's legal and illegal. You need to know that as an umpire. You got to know that stuff cold. It's some of the easiest parts. Periods, timing, substitutions. Now you would think as an umpire, we don't have timing responsibilities. We don't really deal with substitutions. Yes, in the 5-man game, we're counting offense. In a 4-man game, we're counting defense. But that's how many players are on the field. It's not what that substitution, did they come on, go off? Did they come on, communicate, go off? We really don't necessarily deal with that in part of our responsibilities. But again, as that hub, we need to know what that is. As an umpire, I'm communicating every time with my white hat what the status of the clock is. Whether I turn and look at it, if I have an opportunity to do that, or I'm looking to my line judge and expecting to see something from them, I'm communicating every time, especially when the white hat has back to the field or back to the clock, I'm sorry. Need to communicate those things and understand what that is and understand how that timing influences. 25-second, 40-second. I think most of us got it kind of down now. When that first came in, we had some challenges about when is it 25, when is it 40. Steve went through great lengths to come up with a matrix and say, these are the plays and this is what this is. So I think that we got it down, but we don't. We still have some challenges there. And again, middle of the field, we need to know what that is. When does a down end? There are times where, where an umpire, because of their position, can see action that the rest of the crew can't see. I have